Welcome back to Masters Tour Seoul here live from South Korea. Another good look at all the players. It seems like Eddie always seems to take front and center along with Faeli there at the Internet Cafe. It's good to see a little bit of the players. We unfortunately haven't been able to hang out with them too much as we've been at a separate venue, which has been a bit of a bummer, but maybe tomorrow.
Around an hour away by drive. I did get the chance to come a little bit early, so I spent some time with those guys. But ever since the event started, everybody's been partying over in the Gangnam area and in like Hongdae, and we're all over here on the very western end of Seoul. But top 8 venue will be here tomorrow.
And you've still been having fun with me, right? Right, moving on to the next match that we have. This is going to be round 11, getting right through to the end here of the Swiss portion of Masters Tour Seoul, at least. We only have one undefeated player so far, the French player Zim, I believe, right up at the top. And we're going to be taking a look at a couple of the players. I believe it's an 8-2 record with Magoho and a player whose name we believe translates from Korean to Beekeeper.
Yes, and unfortunately he's not playing Druid, which is the class that has bees. Yeah. He is playing Rogue. What we know of Yang Bong-gun, also known as Beekeeper, is just one line I got from Krana. She said, oh, he's a cool kid, and he used to only play Quest Rogue back in the day. And true to form, Yang Bong-gun is still playing Rogue, the aggro Rogue, which is probably the most viable or the only viable archetype of Rogue in this tournament.
Yes, that definitely makes sense to me. We've seen a little bit of variation, a couple of players going for the Burgle package. I think we saw Hypno, a player who did very well at Vegas, going with History Buff in his version of Burgle Rogue, which he was very, very fond of. Didn't work out for him all too well, unfortunately, but I like his initiative at the very least. This Rogue, however, I think is in a much better spot in the tournament.
Yeah, no Zephyrus in there, unfortunately, but there is the Fairy Dragon to kind of fill out that 2-cost spot alongside the one of Sap. And then Magoho, a player we have been casting quite a lot over these past few days, and he has that interesting take on the kind of hybrid control bomb warrior, and I wonder how having only the one of those specific removal cards will help him stack up against Rogue, or maybe it will hurt him.
Yeah, we've seen in the past that when kind of control warrior, or I guess old school bomb warrior and raiding party Rogue back in the previous meta with the top dogs, warrior felt like it was in a pretty good spot against there, because a lot of the time it had weapons project in there to destroy the weapons, which it doesn't have all too much anymore, and a lot more removal tools thrown in there as well. We can take a look at the Rogue here as well. Pretty standard aggro Rogue, I would say, for what we're looking at the moment. The real spicy inclusion, I suppose, being primary deck Chef Nomi.
Yes.
Which I think will be in a pretty good spot against this warrior.
Okay.
I'm going to hold you to it to sing that when it comes out.
Just make me sing the Saviors of Old Doom song. That's the easy one. And this is way above my level.
I'm not going to lie. Your rendition of Chef Nomi's theme, straight fire.
Thanks, Eric. That's the best thing anyone's ever tweeted at me. But anyway, yes, having Chef Nomi primary along with the double Shadow Steps, essentially, should the Myras not come too late, means that Yang Bong-gun can set up 3 boards, which requires the warrior to have Brawl, Brawl, and something else.
Yes, the downside can often be, as we take a look at Magoho's deck, that with the Myra's unstable element, it's Bomb Warrior. You can very often just find yourself being killed by all the bombs that are shuffled into your deck over the course of the game. But I guess it's not quite so bad, given that Magoho does not have the full suite of bombs that we've seen in some of the old school lists. He's only running 1 Elec. He's not running the Sephorium bombers that some of the lists were going for.
But he still does have double Goblin and double Wrench Caliber, so
it's not bad.
Should it get to that late of a game, he can hold on to up to, I think, 4 bombs in a turn.
Yeah.
And that can deal the 20 damage immediately after a Myra. So that's something that Beekeeper has to keep in mind. On top of the not full suite of bombs, though, he's got a bunch of one-ofs. The Plague of Wrath is the one that stands out to me in case he can't just kill Beekeeper straight up after the Myras. He can have Plague of Wrath to deal with a Nomi board.
I mean, there's a lot of other one-ofs that stand out a lot more to me in that I would consider they're pretty core as 2-ofs.
Yeah.
1 Shield Slam is very surprising. I would say only 1 Town Crier at this point is a bit of an anomaly. A lot of players are going for the 2 Town Criers given how busted the Rush minions are.
Agreed. And the 1 of Eternium Rover, I think, probably hurts him in the Rogue matchup a lot because those 1-drops, Eternium Rover and Town Crier, just to have some type of presence in the early game is actually very annoying for the Rogue.
Yeah. As we can see there, these standings being updated. Some of the players already finished with their round 11 matches.
Wow,
Suni going up to
Suni.
9-2, as well as Physics King.
Yeah.
We already got to see one of their matches up against each other. I think the most entertaining match we've seen here so far, with Physics King milling, what was it, like 18 cards
Something
from
like
his
16,
opponent?
I think. Yeah, those two are buddies, and they brought the exact same lineup, card for card, the combo priest with Octasari in the sideboard. And I called it yesterday that I thought Suni and Physics King, at least one of them, would make it to top 8 and maybe take the entire tournament. I'm happy to see that their results are, speaking for themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially as I imagine they'll start to do even better as we go on to the rest of the tournament, because a lot of the Warriors, I feel like, have been sifted out from the top percentages of lineups. We're only really seeing, from the top of my memory, Deaddraw and Magoho with the Warriors right up at the top. And I would imagine that the Bomb Warrior is probably maybe slightly more reasonable for the Priest to deal with. Actually, maybe the Bomb's shuffling in, it gets kind of...
It's honestly...
still not a great matchup.
I think it's more of the inclusion that his quote-unquote Bomb Warrior has a Plague of Wrath. That one's a big one. And he did cut a Shield Slam, but for that cut, he's running an Execute. So,
that's true.
I mean, I think he still has a decent amount of removal to deal with Priest. And I can't say whether regular Control Warrior or Magoho Warrior is more favored.
We'll have to be seeing it as we advance on, because I would imagine with Physics King and Suni both being at the 9-2 record, they're going to be in with a pretty good shot of at least one of them getting through to the top 8.
Right.
But jumping into the game here, Beekeeper, getting to see him, I think, for the first time have we cast him so far.
It's true.
Well, it's good to get to see him.
I have been seeing his name, though, up in the top 16 standings. We've been shifting sometimes from the Korean text to their official English translations.
Yes.
But I have seen Beekeeper, consistently performing throughout the day. And he's like shaking his head. That's a 1-of Rover. What's it doing on turn 1? Alongside a Town Crier, which is also 1-of, by the way. Man, Magoho should be playing Reno decks for this kind of luck.
I don't think I've seen a Warrior not play a 1-drop in 1 ever in like the last 5 months. It seems just every single time they're going with the Town Crier or the Eternium Rover. It's pretty busted up against the Rogue, especially when you're going second.
Yeah.
But for Beekeeper, the real saving grace for him now is he top-decked the Myras. His entire game plan can shift so drastically now that that has been found. Because while being behind on board at the start of the game is still bad, he'd much rather be getting in that early chip damage. It's not game over.
I would also say that the fact that it's both of the 1-of-1 drops and not just one means that the Fairy Dragon is not safe to come down. Usually Fairy Dragon is kind of a problematic card for Warrior to deal with pre-turn 4. They don't run Weapons Project anymore. And now Beekeeper doesn't have the luxury to simply drop it on 2. He has to expend coin now. And then that means the curve for the following turns is a little bit more awkward. Also, we're on the Korean client right now, so I think that's called Wasteland Assassin in English.
I think it is.
Yeah, but it's an above-average outcome, I would say. Just having stealth just seems like it would be a roguey card to begin with.
It does indeed. I'm kind of glad that they're printing some more stealth cards again. It feels like it's been a while since we've had some good ones. Harbinger Celestia does not count. Okay, it's not the same.
Yeah. Most importantly, though, it is not a generous mummy that the Pharaoh Cat gave.
For the first time, yeah. I'd like to report a bug. I did not get generous mummy. There's clearly something wrong.
All right, so Beekeeper has the option to just play another SI, but that's so bad into Restless Mummy, which he knows should almost certainly be in hand because of Town Crier.
Yeah.
So he's instead just going to start chucking away at the face. I like this.
Yeah, I think this is still the correct play to go for. It's kind of sad because getting rid of the Shadow Step does obviously limit your Chef Nomi game plan later on in the game a fair bit. But I agree. Restless Mummy was just too bad.
And by mistake, he actually decides to hold on to the Hooked Scimitar. And granted, there's no weapon removal in the primary, at least for Magoho Warrior, so I can definitely understand the reasoning. Just saving this to remove either a Mummy or, say, a Dinomatic or a Clockwork Goblin later on. And just kind of hold out, I suppose, until he can go for the triple Nomi plan.
I guess this turn also ends up a little bit unfortunate, though, because he really wants to be able to develop a little bit more heavily with his minions onto the board, but everything that could come down on turn for 5 mana or 4 mana would just completely decimate this board. Ziliax, Dynamatic, Restless Mummy, whatever it may be, this board for Beekeeper, no matter what he does, is not going to stick.
Yeah, every play looks really sad, and I suppose it's even worse if you play 2 minions at once because the Restless Mummy immediately gets rid of them. But the fact that he doesn't have ways to clear the back end of the Restless Mummy, aside from the SI, is kind of like counterintuitive, right? You're gonna have to do something at some point.
Yeah, I mean, I was honestly starting to look at just going with something like Fairy Dragon Eviscerate Face, because expending cards, even if they're dealt with, is pretty important, I think, due to the fact that you want to set up for a bigger Myra's as early as possible. You don't want to leave that too late, I don't think. And so leaving your opponent with a worse Restless Mummy, a worse Dynamatic, and getting that damage through to face, I think was definitely something to consider. That's something to even more heavily consider.
And that is quite the top deck. The perfect card. No need to run Zephyrus for it. So getting an Arcanine Reaper online is always very good, and he can send the first half of it to clear the Dynamatic.
Will he necessarily do that? Is there any consideration for just jamming it face right now?
Snip, Snap, and Zilliax, I suppose.
Bit too scary. Fair enough. Fair enough. I can't begrudge him going for the board control plan, especially as the Nomi game plan is still very much live. He hasn't taken too much damage quite yet, I would say. So while he needs to be careful, you know, there is still the possibility for Beekeeper to go for the Chef Nomi board control game plan.
And now I suppose the turn is just going to be a Wasteland Assassin. While off curve, it is coming down after he's seen a Dynamatic, so probably more likely to stick. With the Miscreant, though, that gives him an option instead of going SI and getting some lackeys.
I guess he kind of needs to make the decision as to whether or not he will even play the SI before the Myras. I would guess yes, because obviously, you know, it adds 2 cards to your hand, but they're relatively easy to get rid of next turn with just double Lackey Assassin.
Yeah, those are good ones too. He kind of needs the board development.
Yeah.
And Beekeeper very patiently holding on to the Hooked Scimitar. Wow. There's the one of Elec, and he can put in 4 bombs this turn if he so chooses.
It's a bit of a weird situation, right? Because I think even at this high health total, he might even prefer to put the Restless Mummy into the SI just to stop any damage coming through to face, because he has so much removal as it currently stands that he can deal with even a Nomi and a Shadow Step because he's got the 2 brawls. So just damage mitigation, I think, is one of his top priorities.
While that's true, I don't necessarily like how the Reborn side of the Mummy stacks up against the Evil Miscreant.
Yes, true.
So I wouldn't mind him just taking another 3 here and perhaps saving the Mummy to remove something more threatening.
I can agree with that.
And also just having the 4 bombs in deck in the first place kind of slightly disincentivizes the Myra, because, you know, Beekeeper, if he's very unlucky and rips the Myra soon, could go down to 3 health.
Well, it kind of puts Beekeeper in a weird situation, right, where if he finds if he finds Nomi without having to go through with the Myras, as he just did, then maybe he just rips it with a full hand in order to try and burn as many bombs off the top of his deck as possible.
It's really tough to say how to optimize the timing. But yeah, with the Chef Nomi draw, I'm sure the Myra is going to be happening sooner rather than later. Sooner rather than later. Oh god, that was a bad joke from yesterday. Perhaps the turn starts with Faceless Lackeys, but I can also see a world where he goes for Wasteland Assassin and Eviscerate. Yeah, just clear this stuff. Make way for the Chef.
So many options.
That's quite a good idea for like an apron with Chef Nomi on it.
Can you somehow get the apron to play the song when it enters
the board?
It's got like
speakers in it.
Yes.
Every time you smell that, you'll be like Pavlov's dogs.
Serpent Ward, that goes face.
Yes.
Like the mini obelisks, you know?
Oh!
Oh!
Those aren't bad, actually.
Yeah, if he can find a way to destroy his own Lost Soul, I think is the name.
I think so, yeah.
That is
Lost
suddenly
Spirit.
a lot of damage on board. And it seems like the plan is now just going to deviate from playing the Wasteland Assassin at all. Which kind of makes sense. The mana investment is really expensive, and this is a board that already looks like it needs to get Warpathed. I don't know if it needs to get Brawled, though. That seems like a bit of an overreaction.
Well, that's the thing for Magoho, right, is he does not know his opponent's hand.
Yeah.
He does not know what he's looking at. He knows one of the cards is a Reborn card off Cat. So he's thinking, if one of those 2 cards is not exactly Myra's, he's not going to need the rest of the balls.
That's true. And also, I suppose, just having that Lost Spirit on board without dealing with the rest of the things is a little scary. So I probably personally would have been inclined to go for some type of Wrench Caliber turn there. Maybe Wrench Caliber and Clockwork Goblin just remove one thing, but in any case, we're
Magoho
going off.
sitting up in his seat, hoping to see as many bombs activate as possible.
2.
That's 2 now.
There were 5 in the deck, I think.
2 is an acceptable amount. I don't think either player can be too upset about that.
Granted that Magoho can just chuck in another 2 guaranteed over 2 turns.
Yeah, I think that's
He
just
just needs to survive this turn, and he almost certainly will.
Yeah, he can't die.
He can even remove the Edwin with the Mummy.
I don't think that Beekeeper has any way to shuffle cards into his deck either, unless we get to see like Evil Miscreant
into Ethereal Lackey into Togwaggle Scheme.
Yes, that's what we're looking at.
Oh my goodness. And that would mean no Nomi this turn.
Yeah, which is not really an option.
Yeah.
But Beekeeper knows he's just dead on the next turn anyway.
Yep. Fatigue.
Magoho here, bit of an unfortunate situation for Beekeeper. I'm not sure if he could have gone for just ripping the Myras a turn earlier. It was something to consider, but the problem was that when Magoho went for his aggressive play, as you suggested, with Elic and Clockwork Goblin, what it meant is the Myras was kind of unplayable on that turn because he had to win back board control first. Taking 6 damage was just not an option.
And that is going to be it for game number 1 in the favor of Magoho, which is honestly what we expected. Just any archetype of warrior these days seems to line up against any archetype of rogue favorably. But it did really help Magoho that his early start was insane.
It was, yeah. It was fantastic. Getting the only 2 1-drops in his deck is a bit of a high roll when you're that warrior. It's a really weird build of the warrior, and I think for the most part, I think there's a couple of things I would change. I'm not sure if I'm so big a fan of having that many 1-offs in the deck. Generally, I think you want to solidify it up and have more 2-offs in the deck. But I think given that it's quite clearly geared towards Mage, is a pretty good way to go in your primary with Big Game Hunter in there. Plague of Wrath, I would say, is a pretty good anti-Mage wide board tool. But I think even against Mage, having a couple more early game aggressive options is actually just not bad at all.
I mean, I would argue maybe just removing the bomb package if you're trying to go against Mage, but I really just think Magoho is just trying to cast the widest net possible with this primary deck, and even though on instinct I feel like that shouldn't be working, we cannot argue with his results. So maybe this is just the next level of how the specialist meta is trying to develop.
The less consistent you make your deck, the more consistent it will be. No?
You can put it that way.
Okay, but or just build a good deck, I suppose, would be the better way of putting it. So for these players' decks heading into games 2 and maybe 3, I imagine that the rogue might have some kind of an anti-warrior sideboard teched in if you have access to the deck list. Sorry to put you on the spot.
No worries. It is a privilege being the only person that bought Wi-Fi at the airport.
I have Wi-Fi, it just doesn't work. I can't get the deck
Okay,
list
buy
up
a
for some
local
reason.
sim.
Yeah, I should probably do that.
Anyway, secondary deck for Beekeeper looks like it's tech towards Mage with Walk the Plank, so we're not going on to that one. Tertiary is where things get a bit spicier, I believe. Spirit of the Shark makes its triumphant return into Rogue.
Shark, Heist Baron, Togwaggle.
Yes, and Togwaggle Scheme.
All right, now we're talking.
Yes.
Now we are talking. Giving yourself a little bit of extra survivability in terms of shuffling in the fatigue state against Bomb Warrior seems very, very effective. Especially as just being able to get that consistency of draw, because if you don't hit the Myra's unstable element, Togwaggle is a fantastic way to make sure that you are keeping up your powerful draws.
That's right. Over onto Magoho's side, I don't think he has any side for aggro because his tertiary deck is meant for the Warrior Mirror and the secondary is meant to cover any oddball mech paladins and mech hunters that come out with EMP operatives. So Magoho, in all likelihood, is staying on the primary.
And he's got a pretty reasonable hand to be moving forward with. Dr. Boom Mad Genius feels like he's been overshadowed, the poor guy, by the Galaxy, Luna's Pocket Galaxy in this particular tournament. He's still toxic, don't worry, he's still here knocking about, ready to ruin all your fun.
I remember watching Zalay stream like a couple days into the expansion. Stream title was Fun Police, and guess what deck he was playing?
Yeah, man, I do not enjoy losing to Dr. Boom, I'll tell you that.
So Heist Baron Togwaggle is a card we haven't seen for a quick minute, I would say. Just this past week where Rogue at first fell off completely and then people started coming up with the Hooked Scimitar lists and they deemed the old Tog boy a little too slow. But now he's back, and coupled with the scheme, as you mentioned, it could be a lot of the juice against Warrior. But just like in the olden days, when you run that much of a greedy package, sometimes you run up with this problem of having nothing to do in the early turns, just like right now.
You can indeed, which is pretty much the nightmare for an aggressive build of Rogue. I'm not actually sure what he took out of his early game. I imagine against Warrior you're going to be losing some of the kind of the lighter stuff in the deck. I don't know, maybe backstabs, SI7s, something like that. But that does still hurt you. You have to still fight for tempo early on.
He's removed the deck hands and the eviscerate.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So a lot of the burst, I guess, going out in favor of a board control plan, which is reasonable, but that hasn't removed any of the early game meat from the deck, of which he has drawn absolutely none. This is a terrible start.
Okay, there's a little bit of the meat removed. The Fairy Dragon is gone. I don't really have access to the Yeteers version right now, so it's
we have
tough
to go
to
off
see
differences.
what actually is in and out. But Pharaoh Cat is a very welcome sight, I suppose, for Beekeeper, just to get something done this turn. You know what? Generous Mummy is playable this turn if you get that one.
Yeah.
But we'll take that other adjective
I
of
think
Mummy,
we'll
too.
take that a little bit more.
So Beekeeper actually playing defensive for these early turns, hoping to just survive until he can get to Evil Miscreant and then do the fun thing with Togwaggle. And if you have Shark on board, you can get double treasures. And if you have Scheme, you can have a trade of Togs and all of that.
Yeah. I fully agree this is the way to go. Again, with the Eviscerates and the deck hands out of the deck, it's not even that he has that much burst potential outside of the weapons. And we saw how quickly he died after he played Myra's last game. Every single point of health is very, very crucial against this Bomb Warrior.
So the Restless Mummy actually won't die upon first trading, so it cannot clear the other Microbot. Although I think it's perfectly fine to just play it this turn alongside a Dread Corsair.
I agree.
Although the Corsair does just get eaten by the Wrench Caliber straight up, so maybe that's disincentivizing this a little bit.
Yeah, then you've got to decide as well whether you take out the other 1/1. In terms of Ziliax, like whether it magnetizes or not, it still does pretty much the same thing, so you probably wouldn't even bother magnetizing anyway. I think it's more about Dynamatic, that the maths could get a little bit weird on that one. And I think in that case, you'd maybe rather trade, because it means they wouldn't be able to kill off your Restless Mummy. Actually, they'd be able to either way with the weapon.
Yeah, it's just really
I
tough
think you just
for
don't
Beekeeper,
trade.
right?
Yeah.
There's a world where he just completely passes and maybe baits Magoho into playing something more threatening, and then Beekeeper gets a better Restless Mummy.
Right.
But he's just consigned to feeding the Dread Corsair to, I guess, get rid of the Wrench Caliber charge, which feels awful, but maybe feels less awful than passing altogether.
Oh man, it feels even more awful when you're staring down that. The Elec coming down.
Oh man.
Board control still being consolidated for Magoho. More bombs going into the deck. Dr.
Coin
Boom available
boom.
next turn.
Yep. And no Lackey Generator still for Beekeeper. It's looking real rough.
Starting to look like Beekeeper may have just got stung.
This is going to be my default response now. After the line you did a while ago of like, you're having fun hanging out with me, right? It's just silence.
You just silence. You don't encourage me by giving me any reaction. Like how you deal with a child who's acting up.
Sure. I mean, now that you've made the comparison, and I didn't say that myself, but I'm not going to disagree.
As always, my own worst bully is myself. Aside from TJ, of course.
Oh, man. TJ would be a lot of fun to cast with right in this event. With all the puns. Far more fun than whoever I'm working with right now.
Actually, no, I take that back. You're not getting a response. Except to tell you you're not getting a response.
I think this really hurts the odds of us doing a duet Chef Nomi Battle Cry karaoke. But maybe we'll save that for tomorrow. So Beekeeper really needs Miscreant. Just something to get the card draw going. He has a 1 of Novice Engineer in the deck, which goes along with the Shark inclusions. But in terms of cycle, Myra's this, like, even if that's the draw off the top, it's very awkward with the hand he's assembled right now. So I think it has to be exactly Miscreant. The problem with kind of going with the Togwaggle sideboard in this newer meta is that you're not able to have the space to run Evil Cable Rat. Therefore,
Right,
the
exactly.
only lackey generation is Miscreant.
And the problem is, all the while that is going on, he needs to be keeping in mind that he can't take too much damage or he will just die as soon as he plays Myra's.
Okay, that was a good one, Dara. I'll give you that. You snuck that one right in there. Is the turn
Yes,
just
I
gonna
did.
be Dread Corsair Waggle pick face? You just never get there with
You
that
never get
amount
there.
of
You
damage.
literally never get there.
Yeah.
He has to play to... In this situation, you play imagining that the next card in your deck is the best card you can draw, which would be Miscreant. Probably not even... yeah, Myra's is too late at this point. You have too many rubbish cards in hand. So you just imagine you have Miscreant. Like, save the Shadow Step or whatever, the Deadly Poison to activate it.
It's a bit sad to see that the matchup so far has been very one-sided in favor of the Warrior. Even last game, I don't think it was particularly close. Because talking to Kranich, as I always do when I'm looking for info on Korean players, seems like Beekeeper is part of a practice group of Korean players where he hasn't had this big tournament finish yet, but he's had a lot of good ladder finishes. And everybody respects him as a quest rogue player. So this could have been a chance to maybe get his name out there. But, you know, even if he... And in all likelihood, he will lose the series and go down 8-3. There's still a chance that he qualifies to top 8. I think because there's going to be a few 9-3s and his tiebreaker is probably reasonably high.
Right, and there's less players anyway than at Vegas, so the cutoff will be a little bit kinder, I think. But yeah,
I thought Vegas was around 300.
Oh no, yeah, I guess it's slightly
We have
more.
330 here at Seoul, I think. But don't quote me on that one.
Either way, I think that there will be some 9-3 players going through, and I think Beekeeper had a pretty good run of it at the start as well. He didn't like claw his way back up.
As for Magoho, it's kind of like, how best shall I destroy you from this position? Is it bombs right now? Is it tempo Ziliax for dominance?
Why not both? Let's
Sure.
just destroy him in every single way, both mentally and morally.
Looking at Beekeeper's tertiary list, he even found a way to fit in the life drinkers. Just
Oh, really?
it really looks like the old tempo rogue, but it's got Pharaoh Cat, one of only. I just noticed that now, and hooked scimitars. So only the good stuff.
It's like a best of. Like, now that's what I call rogue.
See, Leroy with double Shadow Step in many other situations would look amazing.
Yeah, you're like, whoa,
Cool.
the dream top deck.
We've got 18 damage, but you know, you're just facing the class that can very comfortably go 18 above the starting health,
You're thinking,
and then
like,
some.
Great, I can get him to starting health total, PogChamp.
That's got to seal it.
Yeah, that's absolutely going to lock this one out for Beekeeper. He has no route back into this game.
Going for Warpath here had a very high chance of dealing with, I mean, just dealing lethal. Because this is 15 on the average, but, you know, Magoho knows that there's absolutely no way he loses if he just ends the turn. So that was a tear, just complete stomp.
It was indeed. You know, we've seen some pretty disgusting games here, most of them involving Luna's Pocket Galaxy. I'd say that was the most unlucky thing we've probably seen all tournament. Like, he just got nothing. Like, no early game whatsoever. It was just deadly poisons, shadow steps, and unactivatable Togwaggle. It does bring up some questions about the way he's constructed his anti-warrior sideboard. When, like you said, he's putting in sharks but no cable rats, which feels like a slightly inconsistent way to actually activate the King Togwaggle. Whereas maybe something to go for would be instead the mech package that some of the rogues were rocking with Coppertails and Wargears. Or just something that's a bit more consistently aggressive.
I think that's a very fair criticism, but with Beekeeper is very good scorer still, and I think he's probably at the top of the 8-3s in terms of tiebreakers. It means that his primary has been carrying very hard against Mage, and that means his fundamental rogue play has also been on point. So I hope we get to see more from him. And on the flip side, props to Magoho getting there every single time with his almost Reno Warrior. That's what I'm going to call it.
But with none of the upside of the cards, just running a lot of one-offs. And I mean, hey, it's working. It took a little while for Bomb Warrior to be perfectly figured out as to what we want to go for. And he's got his own signature build, which we will hopefully get to see in the final round of Swiss, which will be coming up. But first of all, we're going to bring you a little bit more, I believe, of the round 11 action coming right up after a short break.